Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. I am super thrilled to have you here today. Look, if you have ever felt that absolute soul-crushing frustration of trying to document software workflows that are just constantly changing right under your feet, you are in exactly the right place. So let's dive right into this. We're going to explore how modern teams are finally ditching those outdated documentation methods and using a totally new framework to capture how work actually gets done.
Think about it for a second. Why does process documentation almost always fail? We've all been there, right? You spend hours, sometimes even weeks, painstakingly taking manual screenshots, stitching them all together in a doc, and writing out these endless, tedious captions for a standard operating procedure. And then what happens? Like 5 days later, the software interface updates, and your beautiful document is instantly obsolete. Why does this keep happening to us?
To really get why this happens, imagine an ancient cartographer. When we document processes manually, we're basically acting like early explorers drawing a static map of a coastline, fully expecting it to stay that way forever. We categorize everything. The land is here, the water is there. But the digital world just isn't static. It's incredibly dynamic. Doing manual documentation is literally like painstakingly drawing that static map right before a massive storm rolls in and completely reshapes the entire coastline.
And that storm? That perfectly illustrates the core enemy we're fighting here, which is UI drift and the resulting maintenance gap. This is what happens when software interfaces change silently. Maybe a new approval step gets added in Slack, or a mandatory regulatory checkbox gets squeezed into a checkout flow. Crucially, as our sources point out, these process changes often don't even show up in a major code release, meaning no one gets a notification to go review the docs. Suddenly, your static SOPs are partially incorrect, which actually makes them dangerous, and all that vital operational knowledge just stays trapped inside individual employees' heads.
Now, the early attempts to solve this problem gave us first-generation AI tools, stuff like Scribe, Tango, or Gite. They're visual SOP builders, and honestly, they solve the creation speed problem beautifully by just auto-capturing your screen. But they completely fail at the maintenance problem. Those captured screenshots silently go stale the literal second a redesign ships. To actually bridge this gap, we have to look at a paradigm-shifting solution detailed in our sources called Peacock Studio. This represents a total shift over to structured workflow capture.
So here's a really important distinction. Our sources explicitly push back against calling Peacock Studio a generic screen recorder. I mean, we've all used tools like Loom or QuickTime, right? But this is fundamentally different. Peacock is a structured workflow capture system. It is designed to act as a literal system of record for execution, taking messy, real-world workflows and transforming them into reusable, interactive guides.
And that creates a massive technical chasm between the two methods. Generic recorders basically just capture flat, dumb pixels. A video file has absolutely zero semantic understanding of what you're actually doing. It just knows a cluster of blue pixels suddenly turned gray. Peacock, on the other hand, captures semantic DOM metadata. It actively reads the underlying document object model of the browser. So it actually knows you clicked a specific div container with the class name checkout button. It inherently understands the deep digital architecture of the work you're doing.
Which brings us to how this actually works, the Peacock capture pipeline. The whole thing starts with a free browser extension that just quietly runs in the background. Because it lives in the browser, it can capture your specific actions, text inputs, and navigation events, and then instantly sync that code-level blueprint with high-resolution visual screenshots in real time. Our sources note this collapses your documentation prep time from hours down to just minutes. You don't have to pause what you're doing to document it. You just do your job, and the map draws itself.
But hey, raw data is still just raw data, which is why having a robust, built-in editor is absolutely vital. Imagine trying to capture a massive customer record that goes way below the fold of your screen. Well, Peacock interacts with the browser to flawlessly capture that full-page scroll. Then, right in the same platform, a subject matter expert can instantly polish it up. You can precisely crop things, blur out sensitive client data, throw on a professional gradient background. You're bypassing the whole graphic design bottleneck entirely and instantly turning a messy bug report into a boardroom-quality asset.
Okay, but if you take massive piles of raw data and just dump 50 linear steps onto an end user's screen, that is a guaranteed recipe for cognitive overload. By step 6, their eyes are going to glaze over for sure. So how do we take all that data and actually turn it into a digestible narrative? We have to structure the chaos.
And that is exactly where the Flow Editor arsenal comes into play. Because Peacock captures structured data and not just a flat video, it operates on a nodal graph database structure. This is huge because it enables branching decision paths. It's literally like a choose-your-own-adventure book. Say step 4 of an onboarding flow changes depending on whether someone is an admin or a standard user.
You don't need to record two entirely separate videos. You just insert a branch point, and it combines those multi-layered scenarios into one unified experience.
This next feature really brilliantly illustrates how we can take that structure even further using persona tours. Let's say you're sending a product workflow to Cynthia, who's a senior software engineer. He doesn't want to wade through HR compliance or billing stuff, right? He just wants the API configuration and pipeline reporting. With Peacock, you can bundle specific flow documents into a curated journey just for Cynthia. Or for your VP of sales, you just show them the high-level demos and hide the granular API details. By excluding the noise, you radically increase the relevance of the information.
And once you've curated that perfect journey, delivery is everything. This is the absolute brilliance of dual modality. A single capture event generates two completely different ways to consume the content. First, you get an interactive player, which is a guided, video-like presentation where users click through the workflow step by step. But at the exact same time, without doing any extra work, it generates a scrollable PDF-style document for asynchronous reference. So you're serving both the person who wants a guided tour and the engineer who just wants to hit Control-F to find a specific port configuration.
All right, let's circle back to the elements for a minute, that changing coastline we talked about earlier. What happens when your product team inevitably moves a critical submit button from the bottom left up to a sticky header on the right, or they add a mandatory compliance checkbox? Just like that, your documentation drifts away from the live product.
To structure the QA validation process and actually catch this drift, Peacock offers this amazing Compare Flow Docs feature. Instead of that soul-crushing dual-monitor staring contest where you're trying to manually cross-reference static images, you can load version 1.0 and version 1.1 side by side. You just step through a synchronized index to visually align the drift and see exactly what changed. It brings so much discipline and visual reliability to release reviews.
Now, this reveals a pretty hard philosophical line the platform draws regarding enterprise hygiene. In a tech world currently obsessed with generative AI, Peacock deliberately relies on deterministic automation rather than guesswork. Because it actually captures the DOM metadata, like the true IDs and classes of the buttons you clip, it uses secure, on-device rules to automatically write step titles, no AI hallucinations, and your data privacy is protected, which guarantees the resulting documentation is predictable and inherently trustworthy.
So you might be wondering, where does this fit into the corporate ecosystem you already have? Well, our sources are very clear on this. It's designed to complement, not replace, your existing knowledge platforms. We are really looking at the vital distinction here between high-level theory and granular execution reality.
Think about your traditional knowledge wikis, like Confluence or SharePoint. Those are fantastic for storing theoretical policies, the ideal of what should happen. But manual documentation on those platforms decays so fast because the UI moves way faster than the docs. Peacock Studio acts as the execution layer. It embeds directly into those wikis, providing the grounded semantic reality of how the work actually happens on the screen, step by step.
Which leaves us with this final, somewhat terrifying, but absolutely essential question to mull over as we wrap up this explainer. How much of your current company wiki is actual reality versus outdated theory? Are you navigating your digital landscape using a map of a coastline from before the hurricane hit? I really hope this deep dive into structured workflow capture has given you a powerful new perspective on how to keep your team's knowledge accurate, dynamic, and truly useful. Thanks so much for learning with me today.